Hey, it's Alan, and I just wanted to let you know that you can now listen to the ongoing history of new music early and ad-free on Amazon Music, included with Prime.
Every once in a while, things come together for a city's music scene. Demographics, economics, politics, social issues, they all collide just right in a completely unforeseen, unsuspected, fractalish sort of way to create something very, very special. And then there's the final component, getting people on the outside to pay attention and recognize that, yes, something really cool is happening in a particular city. Then the outsiders, the non-belongers, start evangelizing. Over the decades, this bit of rock and roll fairy dust has descended upon Cleveland, Memphis, New York, London, Toronto, Montreal, Austin, Seattle, and a few other lucky places. This time, though, I want to talk about Manchester, a formerly dark, dismal, decrepit industrial city that one travel writer picked as one of the 12 worst cities to visit in the entire world. Musically, though, well, that's kind of a different story. And this story has been told many times in books and films about Manchester bands like Joy Division and the Smiths and Oasis, along with feature movies like 24-Hour Party People. But this is going to be different. I have with me someone who was there, someone who was right in the middle of it all the craziness of the Madchester era of the late 80s and early 90s. What you're about to hear is what really happened from someone who frankly made it all happen. This is an oral history of Madchester, Part 1.
This is the Ongoing History of New Music podcast with Alan Cross.
This is Gaz Wheelen. He's the former drummer with Manchester's Happy Mondays.
Manchester's a difficult place to explain. It's a second city in England, without a doubt, and it's a city that's... I know this is really, but can I give you a couple of quotes? Just to
yes,
people
absolutely.
Understand? I've just read a couple of quotes I picked up that are great, and it's Mark Twain wrote, which is my favourite. I would like to live in Manchester. The transition between life and death would be unnoticeable. And then there was Anthony Burgess who wrote Clockwork Orange. London always was and always will be a day behind Manchester in the arts and in common commercial cunning. And then it's like J.B. Peace wrote, what Manchester thinks today, England thinks tomorrow. You know, it's a kind of a, even though it's not London, it's always at the front, especially with arts and cultural ideas.
The Stone Roses, from their brilliant debut record from 1989. That's She Bangs the Drums, one of the great songs of the so-called Madchester era in Manchester, England, in the late 80s and early 90s. Hello again, I'm Alan Cross, and although the whole Madchester thing happened more than 20 years ago, we're still feeling the aftershocks. No Madchester, no Britpop. That means no Blur or Oasis. No Britpop, no current bands like Coldplay or Kaiser Chiefs or Franz Ferdinand or Arctic Monkeys. And this is why it's still worth looking back on this time in British musical history. And rather than have me explain what went on, I have with me Gaz Wheelen, the former drummer for the Happy Mondays. Along with the Stone Roses and the Inspiral Carpets, the Mondays formed the Trinity of Madchester bands. And Gaz was there. And man, the stories.
For many, many years, Manchester was this industrial city in decline. But then the middle 70s come along, and the Buzzcocks show up, and the Sex Pistols play the Lesser Free Trade Hall, that famous show. Which
Bob Dylan one and the Buzzcocks Pistols one, yeah. Everyone was there.
You weren't there.
No, I was in nappies. I wasn't in diapers. I wasn't there. No.
Seems that there were 49 people there, or whatever.
And everyone said they were there. Yeah.
But then, Tony Wilson founds Factory Records, and then we get, Joy Division and everything that comes after that. Then I guess we move into the early 80s, and the Smiths established themselves. But then that was it for a while in Manchester, wasn't it? Until...
It was Liverpool. Liverpool had all the best bands in. It was Echo and the Bunnymen, Teardrop Explodes, Mighty White. It was all Liverpool. So we used to go, and a lot of Joy Division. They used to play over in Liverpool quite a lot. Liverpool, Eric's was the venue, but all the Liverpool bands were kind of storming the charts, and they were like the main bands.
And everybody thought that it was the second coming of the Beatles.
Well, yeah, that's kind of Liverpool. Liverpool's always like that. Bands are always kind of second coming to Liverpool. I mean, they're Echo and Bunnymen, one of my favourite bands, and as long as the Beatles, so kind of Liverpool's got that. They've kind of cornered that sound.
So what happened towards the end of the 80s when we began to see bands? I guess there was 808 State. There was the Stone Roses and everything that came before them. Spiral Carpets, and then you guys, the Happy Mondays.
Well, it kind of first started with about 87, with they had a 10th summer kind of celebration factory. And it was kind of I think they called it the second summer of love. So it lasted for 3 summers, 87, 88, 89. And it started, Manchester's always been musically the heritage, like from Northern Soul. You know, I think Richard Branson said Mancunian kids always have the best record collections. I don't know how he knows. He's never signed the Manchester band in his life, but point taken. And they've always had these kind of, like Northern Soul was, you're probably not familiar with Northern Soul, but it's had this massive movement in the 70s of soul artists, Motown and Stax Records that never made it, and kids in Manchester and surrounding towns and Blackpool and Wigan and such bought these records and made them huge stars. And there's a massive movement. Huge. It's just what's that film called? It's just a movie just come out. Soul Boy. It's a movie just come out called Soul Boy. It's kind of which is about that. So there's always been these movements in Manchester, and then '87 this Summer of Love happened, and then.
And that was a rave and dance thing, right?
Well, Detroit and Chicago music kind of started going. Went over to the UK. House music started playing in the UK. They went to London. There's a place in London, a gay club called Heaven. We used to go down to on a Wednesday night, and they would play it. And then Manchester Hacienda was playing it first. And then the DJs came over from Detroit, Frankie Knuckles and such, and they played London. It was empty. They went to Manchester. They didn't want to go to Manchester. They wanted to go straight home. But they said they were told the flight was from Manchester. They had to go, and they got there, and they were lines around the block, queuing around the block. It was packed, and it became massive. And the Hacienda was playing lots of hip hop and dance and soul, and then acid house music. Well, it wasn't acid house then, house music, and it was packed, and we was all listening to it. And then Ecstasy came along and completely changed everything. And that was, it was so important.
Before we go any further, let me play you an example of the kind of music that Gaz is talking about. This was a huge Northern Soul hit in the middle 1960s. The singer is Gloria Jones, but I think you probably know a different version of the song.
Sometimes I feel I've got to run away. I've got to get away from the pain you drive into the heart of me, the love we share.
Gloria Jones with the kind of mid-60s soul music that found a home in places like Manchester and Liverpool. But there was also another ingredient in the whole Madchester thing. 3,4-methylene dioxymethamphetamine, MDMA for short, or more commonly, ecstasy. Let's get back to Gaz and the story of a guy named Bez.
Legend has it, at least on this side of the Atlantic, that Bez was the guy that introduced ecstasy into your scene.
No, not really. It was the only place you could get it then was I said used to have a gay night called Nude Night or a Beef Night, and the gay nights was where it was all about. So all the gays was where ecstasy was around. It wasn't, so that's when you could get. So, but we have the gay village in Manchester. People used to go there because it was safer. So the gay nights weren't just gay. It was probably 80% gay, 20% people just going to party because it was the Hacienda, and so that's where it all started. And then to say that Bez introduced, not really. Bez has always been he was a couple of years above me at school, and he was always been a bit of a loose cannon. His dad was a cop, and he was always rebelled. He's always been anti-establishment. But as for introducing us to that, no, he kind of introduced himself to everything.
Oh,
but no, not really. No, it was no, not really. Everyone, it was just everywhere,
But it all came in that one summer, didn't it? It was just all of a sudden ecstasy was there. Everybody was dropping E.
Well, as soon as all the kind of straight kids started buying it, 30 quid at the time, around $50 at the time, which was expensive, that was the place to go. So the gay nights, it moved to Thursday night, which was the student night, which moved. So the student night ended because everyone was going in just to get ecstasy from the gay nights, and it kind of overflowed, and it just built up. So every night became this like straight gay night with lots of ecstasy, and then it kind of just spread.
There's also another story about a particular place in the Hacienda under the stairway.
Yeah.
Where you used to hang out.
The corner. Used to call it the corner, yeah. The mad corner, yeah. Yeah. Where I met my wife. Yeah, where I met Vanessa there. So still together now. And that's ecstasy for you.
So and that was where you would entertain your friends?
No, everyone. It was just the whole club was like that. It was like something out of you see that what's the Clint Eastwood film with the pigeon-toed orange peel? That club, is it? What's the movie? There's a bit where he's chasing some hippie through this club, and it's like the pigeon-toed orange peel and that's exactly what it was like. I can't remember which film it is anyway. It was just madness. It was just everywhere. It wasn't the corner. The stage in the Hacienda was like it was kind of set back in the wall, so it was like cut out like a picture frame, and then the stage was full of kids, and it was just full of people. It was just full, everyone completely, it was like Sodom and Gomorrah.
Well,
it was great.
87, 88, 89, the DJ became the star.
Well, the DJs became, Ecstasy became the star, really. The DJs kind of did, but it was all of a sudden people that weren't really into drugs or partying. It was just everywhere. Everyone was, everyone. I mean, alcohol was always my poison, but this came along and it just completely changed me.
So how did Manchester go from being this DJ-oriented, ecstasy-oriented sort of scene to blossoming with, the Holy Trinity of Manchester bands, you guys, the Stone Roses, and Spiral Carpets? I mean, where did the bands come back into the picture?
Because we were already in bands, and that's what we played. So we'd listen to dance music, but we wouldn't play dance music. So obviously it filtered into what we were doing, but we didn't play. We never thought... Manchester's kind of one of them cities that if you try to do something that you're not, you'll get shot down straight away. So if you're in a band and then you start taking ecstasy and listening to dance music, and then your band suddenly starts making dance music, you'd get kicked out of the city. So we carried on doing what we was doing. It just kind of filtered through. It was bizarre because it kind of listened to one type of music but played another. It's a bit. And the Stone Roses we didn't really see them. They were kind of came a couple of years later. They were a different kind of scene. They were doing their own thing.
Well, they were the more psychedelic, 60s oriented.
They were really into that, yeah.
And same thing, I guess, with the Carpets. They because they had the Farfisa organ, and they had more of a 60s vibe. But the Mondays were completely and entirely unique. I remember hearing, something from the first album for the first time. Maybe even 24-Hour Party People, and thinking, you guys didn't sound like anything.
I know, and that was just because we were crap. We were in this. It's like, we listen to all sorts. It's like with Hip Hop now. We listen to everything. We listen to, it was like we'd listen to Johnny Cash, and the tour was it'd be Johnny Cash, it'd be Sly and the Family Stone, it'd be Sex Pistols, it'd be Gram Parsons, it'd be the band, it'd be Willie Nelson, it'd be Stones, Beatles, everything. We just listened to everything. We didn't try to be anyone because we couldn't be. We weren't good enough.
This explains why there's such a good groove with a lot of Manchester bands, because you were listening to the dance music.
So black music and soul music is really important in Manchester, and I don't know why Liverpool you got to lump together, because that's where the Docks, where the first music came in the 50s from America. The Docks are there. Yeah, Manchester's an inland port, and they got the music first. So them two cities have always been the best two cities for music, without a doubt. The Liverpool bands totally go for the melody, the Beatles thing, and Manchester music, even Manchester punk bands, like listen to some Buzzcock stuff, they've got, groove. They've got soul music, and soul music, black music has been really important in Manchester, and I don't know why it hasn't in Liverpool. Well,
there was a lot of soul in the groove of the Mondays.
In all Manchester music, now even it's funny. I was reading something recently about one of the first reviews of Oasis, and it was saying even though they were professional Mancunians, as they call them, stereotypical Mancunians, they had the one thing that was different, that they didn't have any soul. They had no soul music, black music influence in them, which was unusual for Manchester bands.
That's Gaz Wheelen, the former drummer for the Happy Mondays, talking about what it was like in the early days of the whole Madchester scene. We'll get him back here in a second with more insider stories as we push on with this oral history of Madchester. This is part one of an oral history of Madchester, that scene in the late 80s and early 90s in Manchester, England, that still has a lot to answer for. Telling the stories is Gaz Wheelen, a guy who was there as the drummer for the Happy Mondays. Let's talk about them for a bit, shall we?
So, Mondays formed when? 80?
We formed 82 when I was still... I was still at school. I was still really young.
And nothing really happened for years, did it?
What was really funny about... No, because the difference between the UK and North America with bands is in the UK, you form a band, then learn your instruments. Right, in North America, you learn your instruments, then you form a band. I know that's generalising, but so we were just learning our instruments and learning what we were doing. But I think probably about 85, major record labels started coming up. We sent cassettes off, and that's how long ago it was. And they came up and they were like, "What's your image?" And we was like, "Well, this is how we dress." And it was like, "Well, what, you're wearing trainers and we're getting images like, You know, we're not wearing. You know, this is how we. They wanted to, and we wouldn't budge. It was like, no chance. This is what we're doing. When Tony Wilson saw us, it's like, oh, love it. You've got no image. That's your image. You know.
Well, it was between that and Sean's lyrics.
And so, but there's not unusual in Manchester because kind of, you know, you listen to Marquis Smith and The Fall, or you listen to John Cooper Clarke, and you know, they're very kind of, you know,
Cerebral.
yeah. What did they call it? What was the one of the reviews? Was great. It was Hot Knife Street Lyrics or something, that kind of thing. You know, so they weren't unusual though. They were great. You know, Stuck a Piece of Crap in a Butcher's Hat was one of my favourites. I thought, don't know what so it was just, and I think. When we went on Factory, there was a lot of, by the Long Coat Brigade on Factory, it was like, you know, not them, you know. They don't like football hooligans. They dress like football hooligans. They're not, you know, they don't fit in with us. But at the same time, we'd go play around the country, and Factory had a great cult following. They'd come and watch us just out of interest, you know.
Well, that whole image with the trainers in regular shirts, you know, that becomes the foundation for lad culture that comes along 10 years later.
Yeah, but we've been doing it for years, haven't we? We started in the 80s. It started in Liverpool and on in Manchester, and it'd been going for years, and it starts to kind of way. Whenever we used to turn up for gigs, there was no bands that looked like that. We'd turn up for gigs in London and around the country, and people, you could see the in-house sound, and it was like, what are the bands? What are you dressed like? We'd play a lot with creation bands and rough trade bands, and they'd be all looking at us like, what, you know, what's going on? What are these dressed like? What's going on?
So where did the baggy pants and the haircuts come from?
I don't know whether ecstasy probably. I don't know. Yeah. Free, whatever we got free. Yeah. Well, we used to go with Phil Sachs. He had a shop. Who became our manager, and he was the original Northern Soul DJ. And he was selling them, and they were these cheap kind of trousers and cords that were flared, and we just kind of, I don't know. I really don't know that just happened. It just did.
24-hour party people. Plastic face can't smile the whites out with the 24-hour party people. Plastic face can't smile.
The Happy Mondays and 24-Hour Party People from their 1987 debut record Squirrel and G-Man 24-Hour Party People Plastic Face Can't Smile Whiteout.
How was Madchester coined? Where did
That was coined by two lads from Newcastle, two Geordies, who used to do our videos, and it was just supposed to be for an EP, just for a bit of fun. It was funny. We was in the studio doing the EP, the Madchester Avon EP, and it was. We was playing the press a couple of tracks one Saturday morning, me and Paul Ryder, and we had a couple of tracks. We didn't have a title for them, and the guy was saying, "Well, what's it called?" And we said, "Oh, it's just about when we used to go to all these all-night warehouse parties." And they said, "What's it called?" And we was looking through, and we couldn't find anything. And Paul saw the Buddy Holly album, picked a Buddy Holly album up, and went, "Oh, it's called Rave On, just for a bit of fun." And then the next day, the press was like, "Oh, this song about all-night parties that they call raves," and all of a sudden they were called raves. And it comes from Buddy Holly.
Come on, really? That was that
seriously.
simple?
Yeah, that's seriously. It comes from Buddy Holly. Yeah, it's really bizarre. It comes from Buddy Holly. It was just on the spot, kind of made up about, and then they started calling all night warehouse parties raves.
How much did the press play this up?
Massively.
Because they were, the press out of London was looking for the next big thing.
Well, we were big in London before we were big in Manchester. We couldn't get airplay in Manchester. We couldn't get. The reviews were. They didn't understand us. They didn't get what was going on. Same with the Roses as well. And we were filling out smaller venues in London way before Manchester.
Really?
Yeah, way before. That's a great irony. Probably a good year before.
See, this is what we find so fascinating about UK culture here in North America, is that everything is so close together. The press takes such an active role in building bands up, building scenes up, building songs up, and tearing them down at the same time. And things happen so quickly.
And the other thing there, it's not about a band. Is just not about a band. The music's about fashion. It's about the city you're from. It's about the football team you support. It's all the culture. It's a class thing. So it's a real working class. It's a culture thing, and it's like, I think what made it really big was when bands like us started doing. We used to go to after the SNL, we'd go to these warehouse parties that were being put on by lads who were selling tickets at football matches, and they started putting all like warehouse parties on instead of the students. And then they said, well, instead of doing that, why don't you play live and we'll do it and we'll sell 10,000. We'll go to the big venue and then we'll say, GMX says, oh, it's 10,000. We were like, oh, we can't sell 10,000. We've only just sold the Hacienda out. It's only 1,500. Oh, we'll do it. And they did,
So let's go to 89, 90. We've got the Roses have their first album out, the Spike Island gig, which attracts 30,000 people to this horrible plot of land.
Yeah.
then I guess the UK, the London press discovers what's happening there, and they start to champion bands like you, and I guess it was you, the Roses, and the Carpets initially.
It was just really us and the Roses, to be honest with you.
Really?
Yeah, really. It was, and it all started at the end of '89 when we got on Top of the Pops. I mean, you'll probably be familiar with Top of the Pops, and most people won't. And if you were on Top of the Pops, you'd made it. That was the thing as a kid you wanted to be on. You saw Top of the Pops, and by pure fluke, to independent bands in them days didn't really make the charts. Very few. I think Final and Cannibals, not many. And us and the Roses happened to hit the charts at the same time just because of this live following. And we're both on the same show. And just because of that, and they screened it in all the pubs in Manchester. And it was like become a big night. And that was it. That day after that, that's when he was born. In November '89, or whatever it was, yeah. That Top of the Pops appearance.
It was November 23rd, 1989, to be exact. The Happy Mondays with Hallelujah, the single they performed on Top of the Pops on November the 23rd, 1989. Like Gaz said, the other band on the show was also from Manchester, the Stone Roses, and they performed Fool's Gold. And that week, that song went to number 8 on the national singles charts, the highest charting indie song in ages. Madchester had arrived. The Stone Roses and Fool's Gold. Back with more from Gaz Wheelen in just a sec as we continue with part 1 of our Oral History of Madchester. This is part 1 of an Oral History of Madchester, and with me is Gaz Wheelen, the former drummer of the Happy Mondays, and a guy who pretty much saw it all. The Mondays really broke through with their third album, Pills and Thrills and Bellyaches. It was November 27th, 1990.
Yeah, we did that in LA, and we was away for, we'd come to the States, we'd come to North America, toured for 2 months, and then we spent 2 months there, and it was it was madness. It was great.
Where? In both places?
In LA, when we did the album. Yeah, we did it at Capitol. The studio they did Pet Sounds in, I found out later. I didn't know at the time. But it was great. The first day we started in the studio, because Bez came along anyway, because he was just for the vibes, just because he was Bez. And we're driving down there. We stayed up. I can't remember. We stayed a couple of miles away from the studio up in the hills, and we're getting driven there, and we see this fight on the highway, and 2 cars, and someone's out of a car and fighting. There's someone get to the studio, and we're in there about an hour, and Bez comes in, quick, hide the car. The police are chasing me. And he had a crash with someone, got out, and he started punching his car. And he was in between, and he was up there across the hood of the car, and they were fighting. The police were there, and he jumped in the car and drove off. It was the first day.
Let's just clarify Bez's role in the Mondays. What did he do? What was his job?
Do you know what? He was I don't know. He was just, but he was live. We really needed him. You know, he kind of brought Bez. See, I'm lost for words. Bez was a couple of years above me at school, and he was crazy then. He always has been. Still is. I mean, he's in his mid-40s now, and he acts like he's still 19.
Well, he got the crap beat out of him recently, didn't he?
I saw. I mean, I don't know what's going on. I don't know what's going on with him at the moment. You know what? I think I've not seen him for about a year or so. I don't know what's going on with him. I hope he's okay, because he's got a good heart, Bez. He really has. He really has got a good heart, but he just gets himself into trouble. But he's got a good soul, Bez. He really has.
So he was your dancer, he was your vibe meister, he was your pet.
Well, Sean was insecure, so he needed a crook, on stage. Before that, we used to get lots. He wasn't the first. We got lots of our friends who'd come up and dance on stage, or and do that. And we had quite a few people doing it.
What do you mean Sean was insecure?
Well, he's a singer. They're all the same, aren't they? They're all insecure, aren't they? I'm insecure, I'm a singer. Oh, nobody loves me. I write the lyrics. You know what they like. And but he was, because he wasn't a what you'd call a textbook singer, and he never claimed to be. So he was insecure. So we used to have lots of friends up on stage, and we was all insecure. We all thought we was kind of blagging it. I mean, we could play, but we weren't, so we thought we was blagging it.
Really? Because I remember seeing you guys a bunch of times in the early '90s, and even though, I mean, you had been on the road for a while and maybe Sean was taking his medicine at, the wrong time of the evening. I mean, it all sounded pretty good to me.
Well, he was. Well, he's heaviness into the dark side of the drug thing came a lot later than he says it did. He was a lot older. It was more towards the end. It wasn't, yeah, we was. No, we were fine, but we were kind of, at that time when we started, it was all the bands were like art school, proper, we just kind of were along for the ride.
Okay, here's more from the Mondays, and now that we know the story of Bez and his problems with the police, the first 23 seconds of the song makes more sense than it ever did.
Twisted my melon, man. He talks over it, man. You twisted my melon, man. Call the cops.
The Happy Mondays with Step On, a song that reached number 5 on the national British singles charts, a huge accomplishment for an indie band. By the end of 1990, the whole Madchester thing was in full effect. The Mondays, the Roses, the Inspiral Carpets, and others.
So quickly we have other bands like, I guess, Mock Turtles, The High, and a whole bunch of other bands that are just lumped under the whole Manchester banner. If they have if they have a little bit of soul in their groove, and they drop that snare drum like the Blur does in There's No Other Way.
Yeah.
Automatically, oh my God, it's a Manchester
It's a great
band.
tune, that Blur song. I never knew that was them. I actually thought it was a band from Manchester.
Well,
I actually
so did
thought it
we.
was a Mock Turtles. Yeah, I didn't know that, yeah. But yeah, it is a good tune. But when you listen to that, it still sounds like Blur, doesn't it? It sounds very Blur
Yes,
still.
it does.
Even though that's really bizarre. Yeah. Even though it sounds very Manchester, it sounds a very Blur. But we weren't aware of the kind of, because don't forget at the time, we were away all the time. So we were kind of, one, we were the eye of the storm, and two, we were away all the time. So when all this was happening in England and in Manchester, we weren't there.
Thanks to all the press coverage being lavished on what was going on in Manchester, that sound and that influence spread across the country. The Farm were actually from Liverpool, but they got lumped in with Manchester. Flowered Up was from Camden Town in London, but they were called Madchester. And like I was just saying with Gaz, Blur, a band from Colchester originally, were thrown on the pile. And if you listen to this song, you can understand why.
There's no other way. There's no other way. All that you can do is watch them.
There was a time in the very early 90s when it seemed that every day brought a great new song from a great new band from Manchester. Okay, so not all the bands were actually from Manchester, but we didn't care. The party was great, and it looked like it would never end. Well, it did, of course. It always does. And on the second half of this look back at Madchester, we'll take a look at where it all went wrong. Gaz Wheelen of the Happy Mondays has a lot more insider stories to tell. Part 2 of Madchester, an oral history next time. Technical productions by Rob Johnston. I'm Alan Cross.